Hey there, I'm Mark. Welcome into my studio. What I want to do in the video today is revisit the Filament Drybox system. This is the version that I released a couple of months ago on printables, and several of you have commented and given suggestions, and a lot of you have created remixes as well. And so I've looked through all of those. I've done a little bit of work on the system myself. I've also got it in use. So if you look like on the wall behind me there above my printers, I have these things mounted up on the pegboard back there, and I just have them loaded into my multi-material unit. And they're working really well. So after kind of that experience and use and making some tweaks on my own, I've also made my own remix. And so what I want to do today is a couple of things. I want to go through and kind of answer and address some of the questions and comments that I've gotten from you guys as we go through a project of building one of these things. I also want to convert one of my old boxes that was the 2024 version of this system over to the new one so you can see how I've been doing that. And then also I want to introduce a kind of bigger remix that I've done, a fairly larger change to the design that replaces this base down here with the rollers to better accommodate these larger spools. So this particular plastic spool is used by the guys over at Atomic Filaments, and it's always been just a little bit too big to fit in these containers. I've been wrestling for a long time trying to figure out a solution where this fits and doesn't press up against these guides up in the top corners too much. And I think I've finally got a solution. At least it's been working for me for several weeks now. And so I wanted to go ahead and release this version of the system. And rather than just replacing the version that's already out there, because I know a lot of you guys are using it and a lot of people have remixed it, I decided to release it as my own remix. And so we'll take a look at this new roller base, which sits the spool down lower, and some other changes that I had to make to the design to be able to accommodate that as we go along. But for right now, what I want to do is show you the pieces that I've been printing out to build this version of the system and just talk through them very quickly. So most of these are the same as what you've seen with a previous version of the system if you've looked at that. These two parts here are for the outside of the container to be able to hang it on the wall and also stack it. And these are the only two parts here that you'll see that are printed in PLA because they're going to be outside the container. The rest of these parts, because they are potentially exposed to the heat of my poly dryer when I hook the poly dryer up to these things, I wanted to print them in either ASA or ABS. And so these are clear ABS, and this is the new version of the desiccant bin. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. And then this is our base and our roller setup. And then these two flap parts here go on the inside of the top corners of the container to sort of contain the filament as we push it back into the system from my MMU. The only other thing that's here that's not printed in the black Polymaker ASA, which is what you see here, is this coupler cap piece, which I've started printing in black TPU. So it's a little bit squishy here, and I just find that for me it fits onto the thing easier from the outside. It's easier to plug on and off, and so I like to print these ones in TPU. So this is TPU, these two are PLA. Everything else in black here is black Polymaker ASA, and then this is a transparent ABS that I had a spare roll of sitting around. And I like to do this so that when I put the desiccant in here, I can still kind of see it color changing. And so we're going to use all of these parts to convert this box here, which is the old version of the system. And we're going to convert this over to the new version, and I'll show you kind of along the way what I've been doing as far as conversion. So we'll save this tag. We'll use that again later on. In the old version, this piece was just hot glued on here, and so you should be able to just pull it off, just like that. And the nice thing about this hot glue is it also just kind of peels right off of the plastic because it doesn't adhere that well. So that cleans that up nicely. And then I'll go ahead and disassemble the top here so that we can then start to reconfigure everything up here. Now, of course, if you're building one of these from scratch from one of these cereal containers, you can skip all of these steps because you won't have to disassemble anything. But for me, I'm going to disassemble this. I'm also going to save all the hardware. So I've got to save this, and I'm going to pop the little hex nut that was in here out. And we'll save that as well. I'm going to set these off to the side. I've got 3 more of the M3x8 screws and with hex nuts because we are going to need 4 of them total for the new setup. And then we'll pop out the hygrometer here and save that as well. I'm going to just set all of these extra parts off to the side. Later on, they will go into the recycle bin. All right, and we've got a broken off part of the old coupler cap, which never really did work that well. So we'll save this Bowden coupler as well. And I think what I'm going to do to start off with is go ahead and mark the holes and go ahead and put our top corner pieces in place. So this one goes here. So I'll just press this in place, make sure that it's seated well, and I'll go ahead and mark these holes where we're going to have to drill for screws. Same thing with this other piece here. And I'll go ahead and drill these holes. One thing that some of you commented on was, especially for the larger hole, and we'll take a look at that when we drill it in a bit. But you commented that I probably should have advised in my earlier videos on this system to start with a smaller size drill bit and then work your way up so that you don't, break the plastic here. And what I didn't mention in those other videos is I use these drill bits. They're called brad point drill bits, and they're really, really good for drilling through plastic. We'll take a look at when I drill the larger hole for the Bowden coupler. We'll take a look at that, and I'll show you kind of how that works. But that is the secret for me for being able to drill these nice clean holes through these plastic containers, is using those brad point bits. Now they do leave a little bit of sort of residue sometimes behind, so I'm just gonna, with my fingernails, break that off. All right, and that's looking good. Now we do have this old hole here that was for the filament exit in the older version of the system. That's gonna move down here to the bottom on the new version of the system, but I do wanna patch that up so that it's not going to cause a problem for airflow. And so the way that I'm gonna do that is with hot glue. That's what I've been doing when I've been converting these. And the easiest way I've found to do that is by going ahead and putting one of these brackets in there first, and then using that to hold the part in place while I put the glue on. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the M3 hex nuts in here. This one's a little bit harder to do. So I've had a few people ask about this as well, because you've got to get this in this flap underneath here. What I tend to do is just find something flat. I've got this metal wrench here, and then I can reach under there and press down like that to get that to snap in place. All right, so with those hex nuts in place, I'll go ahead and position this guy. That's not the one I want. I want it down here in this corner. And we'll go ahead and put 2 of these screws in. Now we're going to have to undo these screws later, but at least for now, this will hold this in place so that we can patch up this hole right here. And again, if you're building a brand new box, you don't need to do this, but some of you had asked how to convert the old system to the new, and this is how I've been doing that. So now with this held kind of loosely in place, we've now kind of got a backing right on this hole. And so all I've been doing is taking my hot glue gun, and it's gonna be tough to get this on camera for you guys, but basically just putting a bead of glue in there like that, a little bit higher than the height of the plastic opening there, because it will shrink up just a touch as it cools. And then while we've got this, I've also got this small 3mm hole in the top here where a screw used to go through. I'm gonna do the same thing here, just put a bead of this glue right there and then let that dry. So we'll set this off to the side to let this glue dry. I'm actually gonna set it this way on the desk so that this is flat, and we'll let that dry for a minute while I work on the base of the system. So this is the old base. We obviously don't need any of this anymore. I can go ahead and take it apart. except, whoa, there went a bearing. I'm gonna save these bearings if they don't fly away. Because we are gonna need the bearings. That one flew away as well. There we go. All right. Oh, and while I'm remembering, one of the remixes of the system that I saw on printables, this version reminded me, the old version of the system had this base broken in half and you could like slot them together. And I did that on purpose back then because I wanted people with smaller printers to be able to print it. I didn't do that with this version of the base, and so it's just one big piece. So I've had a few people ask about how can I print this on my smaller printer. There is a remix out there that one of my Discord members, Pedro, I believe his name is, so thank you for that, created that splits these bases in half. So if you're looking for that, go look on printables at the remixes of the system and you should find it there. All right, we're gonna also remove this desiccant bin, and it looks like, just kind of looking through the sides here, that this desiccant is mostly used up. And so what I'm gonna do is set this off to the side. I've got a container that I save the used desiccant so I can dry it back out and reuse it. But for now, for today, we'll put new desiccant in the bin when we go to do that. So this lid seal just goes here, kind of twists in place to press up there against that, and it seats in place nicely. And then our base is going to go here. Now, one thing to know about this new remix of this base is that it's got these kind of horizontal tracks that our little bearing carriages are going to ride on. And there's very little clearance between this and the lid seal. And so, and even on the back half here, there's not very much clearance. I can just barely get my finger like underneath here. So the previous strategy of using this base area for holding desiccant doesn't really work with this new remix, and that's why we have a separate bin. It's later going to sit in here and hold our desiccant. So that kind of is one of the big changes that has to happen with this version. But I do think it's worth it, at least in my testing so far, because it gets the spool sitting down quite a lot lower in the setup. So what we need are these carriages, I call them, for the bearings that are going to slide on these rails. And we build those out of these two parts. So we've got this part and this part here with the shaft. And all that you need to do is drop a bearing kind of down into here. The tolerances are very exact. So this should press in, that shaft there should fit nicely into the bearing and like hold onto it. It shouldn't be loose. And then these should snap together. And there is a very tiny amount of horizontal clearance as well here, but your bearing should spin nicely. So this is a good time probably for me to mention the other comment that I've gotten on the older system, the previous version of this system, more than anything else, which is questions from people about tolerances and printing and such. And especially if you're printing with ABS or ASA, those filaments notoriously shrink, you know, as they cool after you print them. And so it is very important, if you want to get these, you know, exact results like what I show here on the video with everything fitting perfectly. It's very important that you tune your filament profile with your printer and the filament that you're using, and use the filament shrinkage compensation parameters that exist in your filament profile to make sure that you're getting exact dimensions on your prints. And if you do that, everything here should fit as I'm showing here. So now these have these little triangular tabs on the sides, and we can just slide them here into our rails. So just like this, one on either side and one on either end. And the orientation here doesn't really matter, but I tend to want the plain side, not the side that had the little snap together parts, but the other side facing toward the outside. That's just an aesthetic choice. It doesn't really matter for the functionality of the final thing. The other thing you'll notice if you look closely is that these rails here are very slightly bowed toward the middle, and that's on purpose so that these will slide and kind of grab and hold in place rather than being super loose as you slide them back and forth. The idea here is once you get a spool of filament to put on here, you can adjust these by sliding them back and forth for whatever width of filament you need. And for those very wide spools like that atomic filament one that I showed you earlier in the video, you basically need these all the way out as wide as possible, and that'll work perfectly. And then you can go down to very narrow spools if you want to, you know, by doing something like this, right? So for now, I'm just gonna leave these about here. And then when I go to finally put a spool on this at the end, I will adjust them as needed. And once those are in place, you can then go ahead and push this down into the base, and it should just press fit down into place nice and tight. And again, you know, tight against the base, right? So I can pick this up by whatever and shake it around and things aren't falling apart. And also just to show you here from the side, the lip of the base sticks up just enough that it will hold these things in place. So if I slide this carriage all the way to the outside, it presses against that. So that actually helps as well. But what that does mean is that when you go to put this together, you want to put the carriages into the base before you press the base down into the lid of the container. All right, and with that, we have our roller base done, but I'm not sure if this is dry yet or not. It is dry enough. So we'll go ahead and finish up with the lid. So at this point, what I want to do is go ahead and remove the screws. And I lost the pressed-in nut in the process. So let me get that put back in place. There we go. And the reason I'm removing these screws is because we need to put the piece on the outside and then screw it back into place. So this is the front of our container. This is the part that goes there. And I'm going to just press this down like so. Go ahead and get both screws started. And then we'll screw them down nice and tight. And you know, now obviously this piece that I've just put in here is covering up that area that we sealed with the hot glue. So visually you won't see, you know, any type of problem or anything left over from that hole. But in my testing as well, the hot glue does help really to seal it up so that there's not air escaping through that hole either. So it's all sealed up and covered up. And it looks just as if we would have built this container from scratch, you know, from a brand new container. So there's that one. And then we'll go ahead and screw this one on the back. Now I didn't mention, I mentioned in an earlier video, but I should cover it again here. The direction of these flaps matters, right? So you want the one in the front here to be the flap to go back along the top of the container, and then this one you want it rotated kind of 90 degrees so that the flap is going down along the back. The reason for that is if you imagine a spool being in here and the filament exiting out the front over here, as you pull the filament out, the spool is going to be rotating this way, so counterclockwise on your screen, and it's going to be, you know, kind of going in the direction that those flaps run. That's what you want. So I did have a member on the Discord show an image where they had, you know, kind of moved this around for their setup. It was easier to have the filament coming out the back of the container, and so they had their filament exiting here, but they still had their flaps this way. And then if your filament spool is spinning the other way, it kind of binds up against these flat edges as it spins. So if you were doing that, if you're having the filament exit out the back of the container, you want to flip these around, right? So you want this one to be going this way, and you want this one that I've already screwed in to be going down along the front. So hopefully that makes sense and clears up any questions regarding that. And while I was talking about that, I should have been going ahead and putting these hex nuts into position just to save time, but here we are. All right, that looks good. And so we're putting this way. And I'll go ahead and put this on here and screw those two screws down. All right, so there's our lid almost done, but we have to put our hole down here, the new one, for our filament to exit. And what I've decided with this current iteration that I'm building of these things, right? The previous version had a lot of modularity to it, and it was designed that way on purpose. So if we put this on the inside here where our filament's going to come out, we have this hygrometer holder. In the previous version, I was suggesting that you put the hygrometer holder down below this, so it needed, you know, extra space here. So this hole would be somewhere up here. The hygrometer would be down below it. And then you could put optionally your tag for your filament up above it. With this setup, since I'm using this version, which has a slot here, here's our tag. So we could slide our tag right in here, right? We don't need that extra tag holder down below. And so what I've been doing with this one is actually putting the filament exit down lower and letting the hygrometer be up here above it, if that makes sense. And so because of that, I have a different jig to mark where the hole should go. And that you can find also in the remix version on printables. So all of these parts actually, whether they're changed or not from the original, all the parts I'm showing here in this video, I will go ahead and list as part of that remix, just so it's easier to keep everything together. But for this jig to work, you want to snap the bottom back on, and there's this little kind of rectangular clasp where this front piece attaches there, and there's a little rectangular opening there that this sits on. So that's the way to align this jig. So you just press it all the way down over that little rectangular area, and then you've got a hole here that you can mark for the center. And if you wanted to, you could draw these as well. Right, so that's the hole that we want to cut. And we're gonna do that with our 3/8 inch drill bit, which is this big one here. And this will give me a better chance to show you what this brad point drill bit looks like. Right, so if I show kind of a close up here, you can see it's got a point in the middle, which is great because it kind of makes its own pilot hole, and then it kind of actually flares out on either side. So what happens when you drill with this is you get the pilot hole in the middle, and then the next thing that hits the plastic is the outer edges of the bit, and it actually kind of cuts a circle of the correct size before then going ahead and drilling down. So if you don't have a brad point drill bit, I would recommend for this type of a larger hole that you start with a smaller size drill bit and then, you know, drill yourself a pilot hole and work your way up. But what I'm going to do here is just go straight in, just lining that up on our dot, and I'm just going to drill straight through. A little bit hard to do while holding it up in the air for the camera, so let me get this angle. That gives me a little more leverage, and here we go again. Right, and so you see it didn't actually do it this time. Sometimes the drill bit actually grabs this circular piece and it's left on the drill bit when I'm done, but basically it cuts this nice perfect circle, and then it, you know, cuts out the rest of the plastic on the inside. So sometimes it leaves a bit of a edge like that, and I can go back in here and kind of smooth that out. And I think we're looking pretty good there. So that has been my secret for you know, cutting really nice consistent holes in these bins. It's all in using the right drill bit. But again, if you don't have those, if you just have regular, you know, wood drill bits or something like that, it is probably in your best interest to start with a smaller size and then cut yourself a pilot hole and work your way up. There's still a little bit of extra flash left here, so I'm just cleaning that off with my fingernails here. And now we can take our coupler, pass it through there. And then I do have a slightly modified version of the coupler nut in this remix. And the biggest change here, other than slightly changing the depth of it just to make it fit a little bit better in this new position, the other change is that there are threads inside. Camera probably isn't going to pick that up, but they are there. And at least for the Bowden couplers that I use, they work really, really, really well. I know a couple of you had asked about that in comments on previous videos on the system. Can we get some threads so that we're just not threading straight into plastic with that? And so there we are, we got threads. So tightening that down, and that should be there. And then of course our cap will just press on over the top of that. And then our hygrometer can press into here. Again, we're gonna have this above. So I need to make sure that this is oriented this way so that it's not upside down. it's only 43%, now it's 45, but in the 40s here in my studio is actually really, really dry. So we've managed a dry day for today's video. Congratulations to us all. And just because I'm particular about this sort of thing, I'm going to rotate this so that that is pretty close to perfectly horizontal. Otherwise, it'll bug me when it's sitting on the shelf and it's not perfectly straight. All right, so there we go. There's our lid done, and our base is done except for the desiccant that needs to go in here. And so I'm going to grab my container of new desiccant. I'm going to pour a bunch of it in here. This desiccant container print, by the way, is a bit of a torture test for your printer. Just in that your printer will probably be fine, but if the filament that you're using is wet at all, then you're going to have a lot of stringing in between all of the little openings here. And then this lid just presses down on top, right? So it's just a press fit. And if I get it lined up right, we can just press it down like so. This is going to be the front of my container, and so I put this in the back here, right? So this way I can still pull this off of the bottom, just like so, when I want to load this onto my poly dryer to dry out the filament inside, and this never has to come out of here. It can just slide in there, and then if I do need to change the desiccant, I can pull this out and change this out, and then slide it back down in here. And it is designed to, you know, when you sit a spool on here, it will have just the right amount of clearance so that the spool doesn't hit it. And then we seal everything up. So when it's time to put a spool in here, you just set the width of these bearing carriages to whatever you need. You feed your filament out through here, obviously push it into the little hole that's at the end of the cap, put the cap in place, and then snap the lid down on top, and you should be good to go. And so that's what I have in my setup over on the wall there, where all of my filament hangs for all of my printers, and then the ones that aren't hanging on the wall are nicely stacked on a shelf over in the corner. And yeah, this is my setup. I've been slowly converting all of my older containers over to this new setup. Now, some of the ones that I built recently have this front hole a little bit higher. It's up here and the hygrometer's below. I don't really have a good way to seal that hole to drill a new one, because, you know, sealing this hole up here was nice because we get to cover it with this part. So those I've been leaving alone. So I have this weird mix right now of some with the hole that's lower like this and some with a hole that's still just slightly higher and the hygrometer's below. I've decided, at least for now, to just live with that. But if any of you have a suggestion for a good way to seal up that hole in such a way that, you know, it'll seal the air tightness of the container but not be unsightly, let me know in the comments. I'm curious if there's a, you know, some sort of epoxy or other type of a thing that we could use that would be transparent that would fill that in. But for now, I've just been having this mix of the two different styles there with how the front works. But otherwise, this has been the new setup, and you can kind of see in the back still here to see when the desiccant changes colors and you know, might need to be either recharged or replaced. So that is it. This is the setup. Like I said, I've been converting all of mine over to this, and it's been working great for me so far. All of these files are going to be in the remix version of this system, which is on printables, and I'll link that in the description of this video. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, or anything like that, you can let me know either in the comments of this video as a comment or a message over on printables, or there's also going to be a link down in the video as usual to my Discord, where we have a ongoing discussion of the filament storage system going on over there. So you can hop in there if you've got questions or want to have longer form discussions about how all of this works. So with that, I think we're done for today. I'm going to go, I actually have more of these parts. I'm going to go convert like 3 or 4 more of these containers so that I've got the rest of mine done and ready to go. And yeah, with that, I hope you guys have a good day. I'll see you next time. Have a good one.